Okay, so are you ready to dive into like a real space mystery?
Always.
All right, well, today we're talking about, that Black Knight satellite, that thing.
Yeah, the one that's been lurking in the shadows.
Exactly. This idea that there's this ancient object, possibly like centuries old, just hanging out up there in Earth's orbit, maybe even messing with our spacecraft.
I mean, it sounds like something straight out of a movie, right?
Right. It's total sci-fi stuff. But what if it's not? What if there's actually something to this?
Well, that's what we're going to try to figure out.
Yeah, we've got a ton of fascinating sources for this one, including a recent report from Russia that claims this Black Knight thing might be behind the failure of their Mars probe.
Yeah, and this report's causing a bit of a stir because we aren't just talking about a harmless piece of space junk here, this probe Phobos Grunt. It's stuck in low Earth orbit, and get this, it's loaded with a massive amount of highly toxic fuel.
Yikes. So we're talking potential disaster if that thing comes crashing down uncontrolled.
Oh, absolutely. It could be one of the most toxic satellite reentries ever.
Okay, so that's bad enough. But here's where it gets really interesting. This Russian report actually links Phobos Grunt's failure to transmissions from the Black Knight satellite.
Like it was deliberately sabotaged.
Yeah, and they even suggest it might be responsible for a whole bunch of other recent satellite glitches, too.
It really makes you wonder if there's some kind of pattern emerging here, right?
Totally. It's
Right.
like, is there something up there intentionally messing with our stuff in space?
And if there is, what does that mean for us? You know, the security of our satellites, our communications, our whole space infrastructure.
Okay, well, hold on a second. This Black Knight thing, this isn't just some new conspiracy theory, right? I feel like I've been hearing about this for years.
Oh, you're absolutely right. This has been a source of speculation and intrigue for decades.
Like, how far back are we talking?
Well, sightings actually date back to the late 1950s, like right at the dawn of the space age.
Wow, so back when Sputnik was like the biggest news in the world.
Exactly. Back then, both the US and the Soviet Union were, just starting to figure out how to launch these relatively small satellites into orbit.
Right, right. Those early satellites were pretty basic.
Oh, yeah. But here's the thing. Astronomers and military tracking stations were picking up something much larger, something that didn't belong.
Like way bigger than anything we could launch back then.
Yeah. And there's another detail that's really strange. It was moving in a polar orbit.
Okay, so why is that polar orbit detail so important?
Well, think about it. A polar orbit takes a satellite over the Earth poles so it can scan the entire planet as the Earth rotates beneath it.
Oh, I see. So like a surveillance satellite.
Exactly. But back in the 50s, achieving a polar orbit required some pretty sophisticated technology that neither the US nor the USSR had at the time.
So finding a large object in that kind of orbit, didn't make sense.
It was an anomaly, something that shouldn't have been there.
It's like discovering a smartphone before computers were even invented.
Exactly. It just doesn't add up. And then you add in the reports from ham radio operators who claim to be picking up these strange coded messages.
Yeah, they were intercepting alien transmissions.
Well, allegedly originating from this mystery object, at least that's what they thought.
And there's that story about the one ham radio operator who supposedly decoded one of the messages, and it turned out to be a star chart, right?
Yes. That's one of the most intriguing details about this whole thing, and not just any star chart. It was a chart that would have been plotted from Earth like 13,000 years ago.
30,000 years.
Yeah, and it was centered on the Epsilon Boötis star system.
Wait, hold on. So now we're talking about a potential connection to a star system like 200 light years away.
Yeah.
This is where it starts to feel like we're in the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, it definitely fused the imagination. But let's stay grounded for a moment and focus on some of the more tangible evidence.
Okay. Okay, so what else is there?
Well, in 1960, a tracking camera actually managed to capture a photograph of this elusive object.
Like an actual picture.
An actual photograph. Yeah, witnesses described it as this red, glowing object moving in an unusual east-to-west orbit, the opposite direction of most satellites at the time.
So we've got this mysterious object, potentially ancient, in an impossible orbit, sending out coded messages, and now we have a picture. This is starting to feel a lot less like speculation and more like we've got a real puzzle on our hands.
And we're just getting started.
Oh, there's more.
Oh, yeah. In 1963, astronaut Gordon Cooper, during his final orbit of a 22-orbit mission, reported seeing this glowing green shape ahead of his capsule heading towards him.
Whoa. like a UFO.
Well, that's what it sounded like. And what's really interesting is that the Muchea tracking station in Australia, where Cooper reported the sighting, they also picked up this object on their radar.
Wait, so there's independent confirmation from ground radar. That's pretty hard to dismiss as just a hallucination, right?
You would think so, but the official explanation was that an electrical malfunction in Cooper's capsule caused high levels of carbon dioxide, leading to, you guessed it, hallucination.
Oh, come on, that's convenient.
Right. But still, this incident, coupled with the photograph and all those earlier sightings, it really solidified the Black Knight's place in UFO lore.
So we've gone from a failed Russian probe to a possible ancient satellite sending coded messages, a mysterious photograph, and an astronaut's close encounter. This is one wild ride.
And we're just getting started. Buckle up, because we're about to explore some of the most intriguing theories about the Black Knight and what it could mean for humanity.
Oh, this is going to be good.
I mean, it really makes you wonder what else is out there.
Right, like are we just scratching the surface of something much bigger here?
It's definitely possible.
Well, okay, before we get too carried away, we have to address the elephant in the room, right? Isn't it possible that this is all just a big misunderstanding? Like, what if the Black Knight is nothing more than a piece of space debris?
Oh, absolutely. That's a totally valid point. I mean, space is basically a junkyard, right? There are millions of pieces of old satellites spent, rocket stages, even tools dropped by astronauts.
Yeah, like a lot of junk floating around up there.
A lot of junk, and some of it can be pretty big, too. Like, big enough to be mistaken for something more exotic.
Okay, sure. But wouldn't we be able to identify it, with all of our fancy tracking technology these days?
Well, you'd think so, right? But it's actually a lot harder than you might imagine, especially when you're talking about older, smaller objects.
Really?
Yeah, think about it. Like, trying to spot a specific grain of sand in a dust storm, it's not easy.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Plus, a lot of this debris isn't made of easily identifiable materials. They've been exposed to extreme temperatures, radiation, micrometeoroid impacts for years, decades even.
So it's all beat up and weathered, makes it harder to figure out what it is.
Exactly, and they can have really unusual orbits depending on their size, shape, how they're interacting with Earth or gravity.
So it's possible we could mistake a piece of junk for something more mysterious.
It's definitely possible, but then you have those coded messages that people were picking up.
Right. It's hard to imagine a random chunk of metal sending out complex signals.
Yeah, and especially ones that match up with ancient star charts.
It's exactly. That's where the space debris explanation starts to break down for me. And what about the unusual behavior of the Black Knight? We talked about its east to west orbit, and it was moving 3 times faster than anything else in orbit back then.
It's definitely not behaving like your typical piece of space junk.
So if it's not space junk, what are we left with? I mean, are we seriously considering the possibility that this is some kind of alien technology?
I mean, it's a question that's been debated for decades, right? The possibility of an alien presence has always been part of the Black Knight narrative.
But why would they interact with us in such a cryptic way? Like, why not just land on the White House lawn and say hello?
Well, there are a lot of theories about that. Some people believe they might be studying us, monitoring our progress, maybe even assessing our threat level.
Like they're watching our every move, just waiting to see what we do.
Or maybe they're just being cautious. They've seen how we treat our own planet and each other, and they're not so eager to make contact.
I can't really blame them if that's the case, but if they're so advanced, why not use a more sophisticated method of communication? Why this cryptic satellite that looks like a hunk of junk?
Well, maybe we're looking at it the wrong way. What if the Black Knight is just a small part of a much larger, more complex presence that we're not even aware of?
Whoa, that's a mind-blowing find.
Right. It could be like stumbling upon a single radio tower in the middle of a vast hidden city.
Okay, so let's go back to that star chart for a second. You mentioned it was centered on the Epsilon Boötis star system.
Right.
What's so special about that system?
Well, Epsilon Boötis, also known as Izar, is a binary star system. 2 stars orbiting a common center of mass.
Okay.
It's located about 200 light years away from Earth in the constellation of Booths. You can actually see it with a small telescope. It's a beautiful double star, a bright orange giant, and a fainter blue companion.
So a pretty pair of stars, but why would an ancient civilization, or an alien intelligence for that matter, focus on it? What's the significance?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Unfortunately, we don't have a definitive answer. But one theory suggests that Epsilon Boötis might have a planetary system, and where there are planets, there's always the possibility of life.
Wait, are you saying there could be another Earth out there orbiting one of those stars?
It's not outside the realm of possibility. I mean, astronomers have discovered thousands of exoplanets in recent years, and while we haven't found a perfect Earth twin, yet we're getting closer all the time.
Okay, so maybe this Black Knight is trying to tell us something. Maybe it's a message, a beacon from a distant civilization.
It's a romantic notion, isn't it? A cosmic invitation to join a galactic community. But it also raises some unsettling questions, like if they're so advanced that they can send a satellite across interstellar distances, why not just pick up the phone and give us a call?
Right. What are they waiting for?
We can only speculate, but one thing's for sure, this Black Knight mystery with its potential connection to Epsilon Boötis, it really shines a spotlight on just how much we don't know about the universe.
It's a reminder that we're still in the early stages of exploring our cosmic backyard, and who knows what incredible discoveries await us out there.
Speaking of discoveries, we need to circle back to the more immediate concern, the failed Russian probe, and that potential danger it poses.
Oh, right. That toxic fuel load is a sobering reminder that space exploration is a risky business. And if this Black Knight is interfering with our spacecraft, what does that mean for the future of space travel?
That's a question that's going to spark debate for years to come if we're facing a potential threat from an unknown intelligence. How do we prepare? How do we protect ourselves?
That's scary.
But we also need to be cautious about jumping to conclusions without solid evidence.
So it's a balancing act. We need to be vigilant but not paranoid, investigate without letting fear cloud our judgment.
Exactly. We need a blend of scientific critical thinking and a healthy dose of curiosity, and maybe a little bit of that childlike wonder that first inspired us to look up at the stars.
You know, it's amazing. We started talking about a Russian probe, and now we're like contemplating alien civilizations.
It is kind of wild, isn't it, how one thing leads to another?
It really is. And
Yeah.
it makes you realize just how much is still out there, how much we don't know.
Absolutely. But before we get totally lost in the cosmos, I think we should try to bring things back down to Earth for a minute.
Okay, yeah, good idea. So we've explored a lot of possibilities, space debris, alien technology. I mean, where does that leave us? What's the takeaway for our listener?
Well, I think the most important takeaway is the power of critical thinking. The Black Knight mystery is a perfect example of how easy it is to get swept up in speculation and sensationalism.
Yeah, it's easy to jump to conclusions, especially when you're dealing with something so mysterious.
Right. There's this natural human tendency to want to believe in the extraordinary, especially when we're faced with the unknown.
Yeah, we want to believe there's something more out there.
Exactly. But that doesn't mean we should just dismiss every unusual event as evidence of aliens or ancient mysteries.
So how do we find that balance, between open-mindedness and skepticism?
Well, it's about asking the right questions, examining the evidence, considering alternative explanations, not just jumping to the most exciting conclusion.
So in the case of the Black Knight, how do we apply that critical thinking? What are the key questions we should be asking?
Well, first, we need to be really clear about what we actually know. We've got these reports, sightings, photographs spanning several decades.
A lot of data points.
Exactly. But some of those reports are more credible than others. Some can be explained away as misidentifications or natural phenomena.
But some can't.
Right. And those are the ones that really fuel our curiosity. But it's important to remember that just because we don't have an explanation for something doesn't automatically mean it's aliens or some kind of ancient super civilization.
So then what do we just wait for more evidence to come out, or is there something we can actively do to try to solve this mystery?
Well, I think continued research and investigation is key. We need scientists, engineers, researchers from all sorts of disciplines to examine the existing evidence, develop new technologies for tracking and identifying objects in space, and really explore the potential explanations for the Black Knight phenomenon.
Okay, so what about the public? What can our listeners do to contribute?
Well, the most important thing is to stay informed, be critical consumers of information.
Yeah, there's a lot of misinformation out there, especially online.
Exactly. So it's important to evaluate sources, be wary of sensationalized claims, and really focus on the facts.
Okay, good advice. And maybe embrace the mystery a little, allow ourselves to be captivated by the unknown.
Yeah, I like that because after all, it's that sense of wonder that drives us to explore, to discover, to push the boundaries of what we know.
Well said. So to our listeners out there, keep looking up, keep questioning, keep exploring.
The universe is a vast and mysterious place, and who knows what we might find out there.
Yeah. Exactly, and that's what makes it so exciting. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the Black Knight satellite mystery.
It's been a pleasure.